My name is John Enyart. I am president of Pony Carburetors Incorporated. We are here in the test room at Pony Carburetors, and today we are going to do a video presentation to show you and tell you how to properly install one of our products. First thing I want to say is thank you for buying our products. They are absolutely the best on the planet. You will see this when you get done with viewing this video and the installation of the carburetor. Every carburetor has been internally re-engineered to remove the inherent problems that they've had since day one, most notably hesitations, flat spot surging, and you will just be amazed at how well your car will run. Everyone that does follow our instructions, typically, even those folks that are afraid to hold a half-inch wrench in their hands, will find this very easy to do. One of my favorite terms, there's no rocket science involved, and with the help of some pictures, it probably will make it just that much easier. So many times we do find that the car or the vehicle did have further problems than just a carburetor, and it is our intent to share with you 30 years of experience, of practical hands-on experience as to how to diagnose these problems, and we're going to make you the local expert, guaranteed. This presentation is separated into 4 general categories: the removal and installation, the identification of Autolite 4100s and other carburetors as they may be appropriate. In this presentation, a special 2-barrel to 4-barrel conversion that will show you some additional items that will make your life much easier. And lastly, the problem diagnosis so that you can solve other problems that may exist in your engine's performance and operation. Before we actually begin the removal and installation of the carburetor, let's quickly review the tools that are going to be required to efficiently do this. We will show you a close-up of the wrenches, which include a 3/8, 7/16, half-inch, 11/16, and 15/16, a putty knife, a flat-bladed screwdriver, pair of pliers. Strongly recommended are vacuum gauge and a can of spray carburetor cleaner, a roll of Teflon tape, and a very useful aid will be a tack dwell meter. We're going to remove this Autolite 4100 that's on our big block test engine, and the pieces that are part of this old carburetor are purposely kind of rusted and crusty, which could be similar to some of yours that are going to be replaced, but just to let you know that not everybody's working with brand new parts. We'll start by removing the fuel line, which is in this case not really correct. Somebody has cobbled a rubber hose. That's going to come off fairly easily. We also have a little adapter, which really isn't correct either, but it got the job done for whoever was using this particular carburetor. Next is a choke tube. We're going to take a half-inch wrench to remove that as well. And if there's already been another choke fitting installed, sometimes a 7/16 wrench in addition will help that. Notice that we are removing all of these items with the carburetor still bolted down while we still have some leverage, and it just makes removing the lines that much easier. Get this old choke tube out of the way, and it's going to just pretty much broke off. Old and crusty. Now the distributor vacuum line for a correct 60 65 and older application is this old rusty steel line, and you're not going to be able to get that off without removing the shield. At least you're not going to get it off very easily. So we're going to remove this shield. It's still apart, wasn't really in use because it was bent up and the heater hose couldn't go in there. But we're going to remove this shield to gain access to the distributor vacuum line. Hopefully I can get the right size wrench on this. Oh my goodness, that didn't even come out too badly. And we'll remove this line. Also notice that this old distributor vacuum line, this is a very common occurrence, is threaded into the base of the carburetor, but that the distributor vacuum advance unit actually had a rubber vacuum nipple attachment to it, so that a short piece of rubber hose had to be used to connect the steel line to the vacuum advance unit. This is all okay. It's just not show correct. Next, I'm going to reach across the top of the carburetor and remove the throttle linkage. We will show you a close-up of this. And the special clip that holds on the throttle rod. And this is the rod from the gas pedal. Sometimes these clips are very, very difficult to get out. We are now going to remove the 4 hold-down nuts that hold the carburetor onto the engine. The nuts on this particular application are the correct factory 7/16 inch nuts, which you cannot buy at your local hardware store. We will remove these. Stand behind here so you can possibly get a glimpse of this. And now the carburetor is basically ready to lift off. And there it comes. Dirty old crusty Autolite. Right underneath the carburetor is the old base gasket. We want to get that guy off of there. This one hasn't been on there too long, so it's not stuck. You'll notice a putty knife in my hand that a lot of times it must clean the gasket surface to get all of the old gasket off. And sometimes people like to use glue or some special adhesive to hold gaskets down. We absolutely do not recommend any type of adhesive whatsoever. And this particular item does not need to be scraped too much. So we're going to lift this spacer plate right off the engine, and you'll notice that it's already pretty hospital clean, and this is what yours should look like when you get done. Not only the top, but the bottom. And here's some carbon that's built up, and we're just going to make sure that's clean. Now, there's another gasket between the spacer plate and the intake manifold. We're going to remove that. And here we have a pretty good sized buildup of carbon, and we want to clean that. Again, hospital clean is a word that we use around here quite a bit. If you really want to get particular, I would suggest that you would remove the 4 studs that hold the carburetor down so that you can clean around all of those studs without any problem whatsoever. And you see, even on something like this, and we're getting some additional dirt. At this point, if you have a canister type fuel filter, you are not going to flush your fuel line. But you've loosened possibly some steel lines, etc., and dislodge some material, and so that you do not have a problem of getting dirt in the brand new carburetor that you just spent a lot of money for, we're going to flush this fuel line very briefly. Again, if you do have a canister fuel filter in your fuel pump, do not flush your fuel line at this time. We will wait till you install the new fuel filter. We are now going to flush the fuel line by just cranking the engine over. Last thing that you want to do is clean any surfaces, possibly with spray carburetor cleaner. And at this point, before you pick up the new fuel filter, the new carburetor, go and wash your hands and get your hands hospital clean so that you don't get any dirt over any of the new pieces that you're going to be working with. We're now ready to install the new carburetor. First thing we're going to do is put in place the gasket that goes between the spacer plate and the intake manifold. I want to make a very special note here. We've provided you with this open gasket that is to your right or in my left hand. And if you have a 62 to 65 Thunderbird, please note the gasket in my right hand. We have had a tremendous problem getting these gaskets. This Napa gasket that's in my right hand is no longer made, but we have one or two left. And look at the tail, like we call it a tail, at the bottom, which is at the rear of the carburetor. If you don't have this correct gasket between your spacer plate and your intake manifold, you're going to have a huge vacuum leak, and the car is not going to run below about 1,500 RPMs. So you must have the correct gasket. I'm going to install the gasket that we do have that is correct for this application. I'm going to install our spacer plate. And before I install the carburetor, there are a couple of other details here concerning gaskets and spacer plates. For a 289 application, this is actually a brand new spacer plate, still available from Ford. Facing you, notice the positive crankcase ventilation outlet, or PCV outlet, if you will, so that you can hook the rubber hose to it. This piece is honeycomb on the underside. As I said, it is still available brand new from Ford Motor Company as we speak today. We do carry it. Will make your installation much easier. Some of you with aftermarket applications, putting an Autolite on a 390 or on a 351 Cleveland may not have hood clearance for that thick spacer plate, and this is a reproduction for a 1970 Boss 302 that, if you'll notice, the tube again has the outlet for the positive crankcase ventilation. If you use this spacer plate, notice that the spacer is labeled top, and that is fine, but you actually need to turn it upside down and put it so that the tube faces the passenger side rear, just as I have shown you here. Depending on what year of carburetor you have, you can either use a 4-hole gasket like I am showing you, or another open gasket that is identical to the one installed underneath the spacer plate. We will show you a close-up here of the two different types of bases that Autolite 4100s come with. They can have what we call a round bottom, which require this 4-hole gasket, or they can have a flat bottom, which facilitate the use of the open gasket. We are now ready to install and position the new carburetor. First thing that we're going to do is, again, remove the shield so that we may install the distributor vacuum line. Now, we're going to show you this as an alternative method because you're either going to have the steel line or you're going to have a rubber hose. The majority of people do not have the correct steel vacuum line, which was factory installed on 66 and older vehicles. This is the old distributor vacuum line that we removed earlier, and notice that it will thread into the base of the carburetor just underneath the front of the shield. Obviously, the other end of that would still be attached or would be reattached to the threaded fittings in the correct original distributor. Very few cars have this. What is most common is a rubber distributor vacuum hose as pictured in, or as in my left hand. The problem is that you cannot buy the little fitting that will properly thread into the base of the carburetor. You can get a piece that's close, and I will explain that. We do carry a 3/16 tubing thread fitting that will screw right into the base of the carburetor. The rubber hose can then be slipped over the special fitting and then attached to the distributor vacuum advance unit. An alternative to this special fitting would be a piece of 3/16 brake line that you can purchase at your local auto parts store. And it will have the correct threads. You can cut off 1 inch or 3 inches or whatever that you require, and that will get you out of the woods in a hurry. We are next ready to install the choke tubes. Again, this is the old choke tube that we removed from the engine earlier, and before reinstalling this tube, if you are going to reuse your old choke tube, and especially if it's still attached to the exhaust manifold, is that you must spray out this choke tube with spray carburetor cleaner all the way through it, and you must blow this out with compressed air. One little microscopic piece of dirt will jam up the choke piston, and we have a cutaway view here showing you that this is just a little miniature engine piston that moves up and down and reacts to intake manifold vacuum. You get dirt in this bore next to this piston and your choke is absolutely not going to work. Notice that when you receive the carburetor that the choke plate just springs back so very gently and easily. And if you especially did not blow out your choke tubes and you had your exhaust manifold glass beaded, this choke will work for 10 seconds, and that's all. We've gotten numerous calls of this being a very disturbing problem to clients, and it's their dirt got in it. So clean the choke tubes, clean the passage in your exhaust manifold, and we're also going to show you right now a close-up of the small block choke passage and where the tubes go in, so that you will know approximately where to blow them out. The fresh air tube comes or exits from the top of the exhaust manifold, and the fresh air uninsulated tube enters the exhaust manifold about 2 inches below the insulated tube, and that hole faces the radiator, meaning the front of the exhaust manifold in most locations. If you have a broken off choke tube, you will not be able to remove it from the exhaust manifold without removing the manifold from the engine. And I'm speaking specifically of the fresh air tube, the one that is lower on the exhaust manifold. It absolutely is too close to the shock tower. Even an angled drill, right angle drill, will not get the job done. After blowing this choke tube out, we have decided to use the old one, and we're just going to reattach it and use it, and we think it will be very serviceable. As an alternative, for most applications, brand new reproduction choke tubes are manufactured. We carry all of them that are available. I would still blow these out before putting them in. You never know what foreign material could have been in them. But these are pre-bent, they're pretty, they have the correct thick white factory insulation, and they will save you a lot of time and aggravation. We will now reinstall the choke tube. The important thing that needs to be really stressed here is to get whether it's a new tube or an old one, get the threads lined up precisely and start them with your fingers, as I am doing here. Because if you don't, you're going to cross-thread the threads on the new carburetor, and you're going to be very unhappy. See, even I'm having to be very careful with this and make sure that they are started with the fingers first. Once the fingers have threaded this on probably 2 or 3 turns, and you're sure that it's not cross-threaded and it goes on gently and easily, then take the wrench, snug this up. You don't need a 4-foot cheater bar for this. This just needs to be gently snugged in, and the other end of the choke tube, whether it's a new one or your old one, is just gently going to be seated in the hole, which is a sealed passage that's existing in your exhaust manifold. Many of our clients utilize either hypo exhaust manifolds or headers, and they do not have a source of heat to operate the bimetal spring in the black choke cap. We have 2 solutions for this. Number one, it is possible to use an electric choke cap that looks similar to this, although we don't really recommend electric choke caps. There are 2 reasons for this. Number one, they open too quickly and cause drivability problems during warm-up. Number 2, the correct spring type electric choke caps that were manufactured for Ford Motor Company vehicles and carburetors, number 1, weren't produced till 1973. Number 2, they have a bimetal sensor in them that allow them only to work above 60 degrees Fahrenheit, so they won't work when it's really cold, when you really need the choke anyway. Much better answer is an extra long heat riser tube that we've had custom manufactured for us. It's got the nice thick white factory insulation, and this tube is long enough to run along the inside of the valve cover, and we're showing you a close-up of a completed piece at this point, but it is long enough to run along the inside of the valve cover, drop down behind the engine, and run all the way underneath the firewall and attach to the exterior of the exhaust manifold. We provide a clamp made of stainless steel to secure it in place. Won't work at 0 degrees, but it works absolutely great at any temperature above approximately 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which is when most of us drive these vehicles anyway. Moving right along to fuel filters. We had spoken earlier of not flushing your fuel line if you had the correct 65 and older fuel pump with the canister fuel filter. I'm holding a brand new correct fuel pump in my hands, and inside you will notice the fuel filter. When you replace this fuel filter, just make sure that you get the outer O-ring, which holds the little can or canister in place. Get that seated properly, and you'll be just absolutely fine. The procedural point here is that now, once this filter has been installed, you must, after the installation of the new filter, flush the fuel line as we described earlier. If you don't, the chances of you getting dirt into the carburetor from dislodged material is very great. 95% of the calls of clients that we get with fuel coming out of all over, everywhere out of the carburetor, we call it Old Faithful, fuel coming out of the vent tubes everywhere. 95% of those folks are with 65 and older vehicles. Some of you will receive an inline fuel filter